Welcome everyone to another episode of DRIVA Deep Dive. And this time we are joined by Abhishek Prasad, a recognized leader in data and analytics and a passionate advocate for the strategic use of data in business transformation. Abhishek has a wealth of experience working with global organizations to develop data strategies that drive actually innovation and operational excellence. In our conversation, we delve into the importance of data strategy and how aligning data initiatives with business goals can unlock new opportunities for growth. Abhishek shares insights from his extensive experience discussing how organizations can build strong data foundations and avoid the common pitfalls when implementing data strategies. So, we also explore the evolving role of data governance in modern organizations, and Abhishek provides his perspective on the critical role that ensure effective governance. Roles such as the Chief Data Officer and Data Steward, and how these roles are adapting in response to emerging technologies like AI. As we look toward the future, Abhishek shares his thoughts on the next big trends in data and AI. From AI's increasing role in decision-making to the need for more advanced data literacy across organizations. This conversation is packed with forward-thinking insights. So whether you are a seasoned data professional or just starting to explore the world of data strategy, this episode is filled with valuable takeaways. Join us for this episode with Abhishek and enjoy the conversation. Welcome everyone to today's podcast. Today we are on our home ground in Hamburg, and I have the pleasure to have Abhishek today with me. And Abhishek, we always start with a fun fact about a river close to the city where we are located or where the guest is coming from. Yeah, and you're originally from Jamshedpur, yeah, which is also, it's in India, and it's also named as the home, the steel city, yeah, so it's the Pittsburgh of India basically, yeah, due to the Tata Group, which is founded there and has started their operation in the beginning of the 20th century, right? Yeah. So, and there's one river, yeah, let's see if you know that fact about it. I hope I pronounce it right now. Suparnarekha. Yeah, right. Yeah, and the name means translated "streak of gold." Streak of gold. Yeah. Yeah, it's a Hindi term. Okay. Yeah, and it means a streak of gold. So the river, it's based on people searching and seeking, finding gold. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Nice. So, and there's also a classic Hindi movie with the name of the river, Suparnarekha. Yeah. Yeah. Do you know that movie? No, not really, but I heard there is a name, but yeah, it's a quite old movie as well. Yeah. Exactly, it's from the 60s, and and what I found out about is the river is used as a metaphor for life, the flow of life. So like us, yeah, where we use the river as an anecdote for data flow, yeah, the movie is using it for life. So yeah. Interesting to know about that. So absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's a lot of heritage to that city, and of course the contribution and the city was set up by Tata Group. Yeah. Set up pre-independence on the establishment of India's first steel manufacturing plant there. Yeah. And then evolved into other sectors. Now Tata Motors and IT, TCS, you would have heard. Yes. But it has contributed a lot in terms of India's growth towards manufacturing, which is why it's a bit iconic place, although very small. Yeah. Yeah, it's not that huge. I saw the population is around 500,000. 500,000 comparatively to Indian standards, of course. But yeah, it is. It's a nice small place, and I'm also coming from a small town. I like small places and as well. Yeah, it's really nice. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I always like to. It's always nice to see where people are coming from and then what the cities are famous for. So definitely, it was enjoyable for me to do a little bit of this research. Yes, um, but yeah, your journey from from India to Hamburg and Kühne where you are at the moment, is quite impressive. Yeah, so you are at the moment the global head of data strategy and governance at Kühne. Yeah, and you are highly experienced, I must say, in data strategy and data governance. So I think your vita says something around 15 plus years where you have really engaged strongly in the field of setting up data management organizations, disciplines, capabilities, and so on. So I saw that you were working for Cognizant as a consultant. You were at Hexaware Technologies also. There you have also worked in the field of data management. It's an investment banking company from Germany. And yeah, so you were also in the industry, but you were also in consultancy, also at Osthas Services.
Ostos, yeah. Now it's Pharmalex or Cencora, I would say. It's been acquired. But that was definitely a pharmaceutical or life sciences consulting company.
Yeah. And on top, you have an MBA in finance. Yeah. So I read through it, and yeah, at the moment you have a team of 30 dedicated data management role holders, a central data management team. Yeah. So I just, like, was telling everyone and just now here and there bits of it, but can you tell us a little bit more about you and about your vita, about each of these maybe spots?
Absolutely. So thank you so much again for inviting me to this podcast and really enriching experience here live in Hamburg, especially the climate. But yeah, I would say that the journey has been really, really, really enrichment, and I would never, let's say, go back and change anything in the terms of, let's say, evolution of how I landed into this role. Yeah. So back in, let's say, 10, 15 years ago, when it comes to data management or data governance, the concept was not really thriving as it is pertinent at this point of time. People were working, but mostly looking at it from an IT lens. Very database centric and very classical approach when it comes to data management, data marts, data warehouses, and things like that. But there were a few occurrences or critical occurrences in the global economic world, which kind of begs or forced the industry to look into this data topics more seriously, and also to spread out the responsibilities and accountabilities of what it means to be a data owner, what it means to be a data steward, and who should be responsible for the content management, who should be responsible for platform management and hosting the data. And these roles were pretty much ambiguous at that point of time.
Yeah.
Everything was offloaded to IT, as it was back in the days that IT is responsible for curation of data, maintenance of data. If nothing works, then it's an IT's job to fix things. But I would say after that departure, then there were at least a few immediate impact that came from banking crisis of 2000s. And then there were a bunch of regulations that came into existence, like BCBS 239, MiFID II, CCAR, and also the US, GDPR. A lot of these regulations heavily focused towards managing of data, managing the traceability of data, defining the roles and responsibilities of this. And this was the reason why we are at the moment at this stage, because it took a lot of regulation, a lot of revisiting of the old classical concepts and coming up with this new concept. So when I was working in the banks, I was purely focus on these reporting, financial reporting,
I see.
and to a certain extent being compliant with the regulations, which was typical quite there in banking industry. As I progressed in my career, I was also exposed to the IT side of the world, and then was dealing with different other nuances and concepts, how we can manage data in warehouse, data marts. Cloud then came into existence. What other technologies do exist in data exploration? The concept of FAIR started coming into existence then. People start talking about, oh, we must make data findable, make data explorable, reuse the data because or monetize the data because we were spending so much effort, so much time in finding the information, especially when it comes to doing reporting, doing data science. This was really difficult for people to do because this data science and BI already existed, but data science, when it evolved, and all these new concept of machine learning models, neural networks came into existence, people always wanted to make best use of the data. I want to build some innovative product to reduce my cost and reduce my R&D cost, reduce my time to market for the product, do a better customer segmentation, improve my product lifecycle delivery, and I need some data to analyze. And that became a problem for the industry. So because data scientists were very, very difficult to get, and the ones who were there, they were charging a lot of money, and most of the time, 80% of the time of their effort went into data exploration, which was very, very, I would say,
frustrating
and depreciates the overall value that they were trying to generate, because you're not able to see the ROI immediately for these investments. So the more and more there was a focus, okay, you cannot have a good data science product, or let's say data analytics product, if I were to call that, unless and until you have fundamentals of data management, data governance at rest. And then with the help of this different other capability frameworks that you used to have, like from CMMI, DAMA, now DCAM from Medium Council, there were some focus which was given, and how do I improve my data management maturity based on the current assessment. And organizations start investing time and effort on these things now. And also they started involving business more and more. It appears that, it used to happen that IT is doing all this maturity and improvisation, but now business said, we see a very huge benefit of this because we will see results from data science. Of course, we have to contribute here. And then there is a amalgamation from both IT and business to address this. So that means based on these frameworks, you assess your management maturity model, and you then define a governance framework that works best for you. And I know we'll touch back on the topic of governance framework, but every organization then took a decision. Okay, this is what works for us. This is how we define this. We are a small scale, or we are mid scale, or we are big scale industry, and this is how we would work. So I was part of those discussions at that point of time with different other stakeholders when I was working at consulting companies, and was instrumental in implementation of those. And then when I joined Kuehne+Nagel, I was also tasked to set this up from ground up in a more organic fashion, where I had to start from scratch and trying to identify what is the governance framework that we should work on, what should be the scope of the governance that we should define, and what kind of policy we have to set up, how the policy would be implemented, how we are making sure that the policy is being compliant or not, being reported, and similar, so on and so forth. So that's how I came into my current role, through these different experiences. And kind of in due course, I started my career from banking, because banking, I was lucky to start because banking was one of the first industry, or very first industry to took this topic very more seriously. particularly due to impetus of the regulatory environment that was prevalent at that point of time, which forced banking industry to look this through a serious lens. And then eventually it's percolated to the other industries like you have in retail, life sciences, pharmaceutical, which is also regulated. And now everybody's talking about transport, logistics, and so on and so forth, because there is an inherent benefit. So I would say the driver was regulation, but now there are other drivers as well which came into existence. So and I would say that that's how I evolved into this my current role, and it was really, really good journey. I would say.
Yeah, I must say, I mean, you just mentioned it, you touched a lot of topics already and different areas, and it's, I think, quite clear to everyone that you're not only a specialist in strategy and governance, also if it comes to technical aspects and capabilities of data management, you have, as we used to say, walk the talk, and have seen these topics are growing. But I would like to come back to the question of what drove you initially into data management. I mean, you said it was you started in finance, and was there always an attraction to analytical work, or what was it that really was like making that topic of data management so interesting to you?
Yeah, very good question. I would say when it comes to finance, and I think specifically how finance deals with it, the product itself is dealing with a lot of numbers. You're dealing with financial products, financial data products, and you're relying on good quality, accurate data. And believe it or not, they also struggle with data quality issues in finance. So
true.
When I was at the receiving end, when I'm trying to build reports, when I'm doing some analysis as a data analyst there, trying to report on things, for example, for BCBS reporting, or if you're a portfolio manager, you want to predict the portfolio returns for next 10 years or next 15 years, or short-term returns, especially when I was dealing with this real estate indices. I was constructing MSCI real estate indices for MSCI at that point of time. So the quality of data was really, really challenging, which is forcing us to clean a lot of data to make sure the calculation is correct. And we were very, very sensitive to the quality of data. Even we were measuring the errors in basis point, in decimals, to ensure that the accuracy is there. Because of course, it has a direct impact on monetary value for the shareholders and of your ETFs or the funds that are being sold across by financial companies. And that kind of intrigued me a lot in understanding, okay, where is this data coming from? Why this is so bad? Maybe our collection point is not really good, or the way we are asking the data from these different money managers are maybe we have to set up something, a proper way to have this interface set up. And that kind of slowly started driving me from core finance to a bit of a mid quantitative analytics, so where I'm also dealing with technical side of things, trying to understand, okay, where is it? This is coming from this database, or how this data is being received from here. So the whole ETL concept there. And eventually I leaned a bit more here, this side, trying to understand and explore this. That's how I grew, let's say, interest in this topic, and eventually it evolved as I progressed into other companies where this topic was really looked into more seriously from other companies. For example, a German investment bank where you were setting up your interfaces with different other data providers, setting up data contracts. And things like that, and how do you manage and govern these, making sure that this data is correct or not. So that intrigued me. And then eventually, due to the banking regulation, there was also an effort to implement a lot of these initiatives around data catalog, which supports your data exploration, data lineage, having glossary of terms that is being used when you're calculating performances of portfolio, of financial portfolios. So these are things that eventually led me to these topics which were unexplored at that point of time. And few new concepts came into existence, like data catalog, data governance catalog, data governance platform, data lineage, which were a bit unheard of in the industry. And that exposed me to some of the other tools that came into existence at that point of time.
That's an interesting aspect you just mentioning, that on your journey, new developments always also came up, and now the question is, made those new technologies, techniques, and mindsets, did they help you at all of these stages to make it, or did it make it easier for you in setting up now data maturity or data governance concepts? Or would you say it was still a tricky topic because every company is in a way different?
Absolutely. I would say the learnings that I acquired in my exposure to the banking world really helped me a lot in understanding how to set this, how to measure maturity, what kind of based on every pillars, and then you have to assess how do you define glossaries, how do you identify critical data elements that are needed for different reporting, how do you define ownership, how do you define stewardship, these kind of things, and then what kind of policies that needs to be put in place to ensure that your reference and master data are appropriately governed. So the core focus was still there heavily on reference and master data, because that was the most ignored topic at that point of time, where things were managed in spreadsheet, and user managed applications which were not very best governed. A lot of macros, Excel macros, especially in banking world, they're a very big fan of Excel macros there.
I think everyone is a fan of Excel.
But they had some weird fantasy around Excel VBAs or Visual Basic applications, where because in financial world they love to work with numbers, and somehow they find innovative ways of building automation tools. But the problem was that was always decentralized. It was still working in a silo. You're managing this at end user level. There's no concentrated effort centrally to automate things and these things. So so these kind of things that created a siloed data management approach. And that was a problem, because that was one of the biggest problems when it comes to data exploration. When you have a data silo completely, and you're managing this individually from one BU to the other business unit, you don't know what's happening there. You're not sharing the data enough. The data reusability is gone for toss, and that bites back to you at some point of time, because let's say if there's a new regulation that comes into existence, and you're still struggling. Okay, where do I find the data from? And it's in some VBA somewhere, and God knows where. And that somebody who built that VBA is no longer in the organization. So and then you're spending a lot of money, effort trying to understand the code somebody wrote 20 years back, what exactly it's doing. And that's that kind of esoteric approach of decrypting a lot of things was not really working out for us, and which is why we had to standardize a lot of things there when it comes to data management approaches. So build a proper data pipeline or ETL pipeline, have a data warehouse, a database set up at least, and provide as much as automation as possible, and minimum use of these. I think we cannot get rid of Excel, of course, but let's use the end user management applications to the minimum at least. And when it comes to the structured approach of data entry, make sure that there is a place, an application that is being used, and that's the right approach. Typically, that was that was the I was a huge proponent of that, and I also proposed that we should focus on these topics when it comes to calling things by different names. We had a different difficult debate around that when a federal agency or the government wants you to report on certain things. There are standard definitions that it wants you to report on. So what do you call, how would you calculate total return and the terms? Sometimes those things has to be analyzed to say what goes into that component, and those fields needs to be consistent across all other different divisions. So that was the let's say a difficult concept when you're talking about harmonization of these different business terms and preparing a glossary on that. But yeah, it is a evolution for every other company in that matter. So I would say yes.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, I agree with you. It's an evolution and a revolution in a certain way that you have to tackle it. And every company has its own pace and certain environmental limitations in a way. And also vehicles that support you in a way in setting it up. We will definitely look into that more. But I have another question to you, a different topic. I saw that you also are quite active if it comes to articles or blogs. Yeah, you like to write. I saw a few on your LinkedIn profile. So I think in general, if I can recommend to to reach out to Abhishek on LinkedIn and to read his articles there. And I thought to myself like, wow. I mean, first of all, good quality. I like the content of it, and secondly, but my question is now, what inspires you to write these articles? Is it your, daily struggle in a way that you see?
Well,
is it your experience? What is the motivation to write these articles?
Kind of both. So you would like to pen down these your experiences as such. If I would, let's say, to put it out there for a general audience, to benefit from these experiences as well, and maybe to also reach out to collaborators and partners who would like to partner with me on trying to solve problems. So I happen to, as a consultant, I was quite actively engaged in thought leadership activities. I was trying to write contents around based on the various projects that I was working on, and what kind of thematic experience that I would have had in those projects, and share my learnings to the audience. But that was definitely I had more, let's say, time and freedom to do that at one point of time, and was dedicatedly participating in these activities. But as when you're working for, let's say, an organization in task setting up this from ground up, you're quite engaged in doing this on day-to-day basis. So I didn't had enough time to build this at this point of time, but I'm still trying to share my content, share my things that I've coming across in terms of challenges that I'm facing in terms of implementation of governance, and trying to reach out to these networks and say, okay, do you have any better suggestions for me, or is it me just I'm trying to figure out is this the only new challenge that I'm facing? And I'm sure that the responses that I receive was quite fascinating from consulting world, and also from industries who are working on these topics. And it's really been thought-provoking from me. Maybe in future, I don't know, but if I were to put all these experiences down, I potentially would come down with a small book on my experiences.
Yeah, certainly. You should definitely do that, because what I saw is like, I could sense that what you just said, that you are reaching out to your peer group at the end, and to engage with them and hear what is their view on it, what are their experiences. So did it help you to write these articles also, like in your professional journey, because you got the feedback and you had like the possibility to also cross-check, double-check, are you on the right track? I mean, as you said, 5 years ago, even if you go just 5 years back, the amount of information or articles, frameworks and so on about data management was not as large as it is today. So being one of the first in a way to touch all of these topics. I mean, if I think back on my own time, and you have 5 or 10 years back, it was a kind of tough time because you were carrying so much weight on your shoulders, and companies were trusting you, or your company that you're working for was trusting you and relying on your experience and expertise. And then you would still realize, okay, there is not that much foundation that I could, go back to and pick up and use. Yeah. So coming back to my question, did it help you throughout your professional journey to write also these articles, engage in these networking sessions and so on?
Absolutely. So one thing that you could learn, and you could, as a data professional, always rely on is the crowdsourcing of different ideas and thoughts. Because sometimes maybe as a consultant, I potentially was working in different projects, and I had access to different ways of how different organizations deals with different data problems. But when you're working with one company, you're a bit tunnel vision in let's say a standard approach of how that firm deals with a data problem. I think it's really relevant for all data professionals, to interact, try to understand how the data challenges that you're facing is relevant to them in the industry in general, and what other innovative approaches that the industry has to address these data issues. I particularly benefited a lot when it comes to interaction with other peer set. Of course, maybe not all tech stack or technology stack be like for like, but there will be approaches in terms of strategy of how you address these issues, and that kind of, let's say, evolved into these best practices that you could learn from things. So writing these down and then trying to share is a similar concept for me. I get a lot of feedback. Maybe I wrote something wrong there. My experience was not very relevant, and that came down as a feedback, and that was really still kind of enlightening for me to understand. Okay, this is maybe this is the right approach, or maybe this would not work. And as a data professional, you always have to experiment with these, because every organization, as you said, is different. Every culture, organization culture is different. So maybe a thing that works in banking would not work in retail, would not work in logistics, or maybe would not work in life sciences. So you have to pick what works. And maybe disregard what won't. To ensure that you're more efficient in terms of your choices when it comes to building a data strategy, building a governance framework, targeting the organization on specific topics when it comes to data management. What should be the top priority? Based on the organization roadmap that it has set out for itself.
I think it's good what you're saying, because it also highlights that these conferences, these articles, blog entries and so on are really of use to practitioners in data and analytics management. It's a source of gaining knowledge, to collaborate also on and discuss certain ideas, methods, procedures, and so on. And what I like is always, if I go to these conferences, I completely share your aspect that due to time limitations, we can't engage that much as we would like to, probably. But whenever I go to these conferences and engage with the people, it has the atmosphere of a reunion, even though you don't know everyone, but because the experience and the challenges that they are facing is so mutual that people can easily relate to you and engage and start to chat and to talk. And I really like it. But as you said, it's it's so difficult to attend all of these events and even engage on LinkedIn. Yeah, it takes a lot of time. Yeah, I mean, in your role as a head of data strategy and governance, building up all these capabilities, yeah, time is of the essence.
Yeah, but at least in my role, it's still relevant. The reason being is because I'm not against in principle with different let's say industry neutral bodies coming up with their own concepts. Or if you're gonna go and read a book on data management from some author there, or read something from DAMA or a EDM Council, they're all very industry neutral forums. But when it comes to pursuing the data management topic purely from academic perspective and trying to implement this, when it comes to implementation, there's always a huge difference, you know. I have undergone a lot of certifications as well when it comes to data concept.
Yeah, I saw it on your LinkedIn.
But if I were to say, can I do this like for like implementation as being suggested in some books for let's say in a company? I would say maybe 50, 30 or 40% still can't be implemented, you know. So maybe you can take only remaining 50% or remaining whatever 60%, which is makes sense. And can be implemented based on how the organization architecture is set up, how the culture is, what makes sense for the organization to address, whether they have enough funding or budget to make those kind of investments. Otherwise, it's all very, you know, a very academic exercise for me. And this is the difference that you would notice as you progress in your career, from becoming just a data management aspirer, you know, somebody who's pursuing data management activity, and to become a practitioner. You're trying to implement these, and you're really seeing the difference between, you've read so many things, maybe not everything works. So how do you bridge the gap and say what really makes sense for the organization to pursue on? Because everything that you suggest has implications, especially in these given times where companies are quite sensitive, cost sensitive as well. So they're looking this things through this lens and say, okay, if I invest so much time and money and resource on consultants, doing investment in this tech stack, data catalog, fancy data catalog, fancy data mesh stuff, or use a different MDM platform, what do I have to gain out of that? You know, how much can I save? So, and that's a valid question. You know,
it's a valid question.
You would do this also if you were to do. If you're a small company, you would do this also if you're a big company. And companies always work on ROI concept. And they always look through this lens and say, okay, what should I prioritize my investments into? And this is why much of these shenanigans when it comes to let's say advising company from consultancy level, building those playbooks, building those good presentation sometimes does not really get implemented when it comes to the ground, because you see a lot of push from or I term it as organizational inertia when it comes to implementation of these governance concept. There's a pushback from the organizations to really implement these frameworks, and also not to implement but to sustain that framework. It requires a bit of a maturity for your organization to understand why it matters and how it delivers value, and it delivers value in short term. You cannot ask, especially in this time, when you're asking somebody to spend $1 million euros or dollars on a tech stack, they would anticipate that to generate value
In
one
short term.
quarter
Yeah, yeah,
minimum.
yeah.
So show me something,
Yeah,
show me
yeah.
valuable in one quarter.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I lose patience as
Yeah.
a stakeholder.
Yeah.
And why should I sponsor your initiative? And that's a very common feedback that I generally hear. I've heard in different other companies, including myself, when it comes to implementation of data management concepts. People run out of patience, and then they'll be on your neck. Yeah. So where's my value? So your investment, you're doing a data project. I want to see a value out of these three. You've taken 3 months, and God forbid, if you go beyond 3 months, it's 1 year or 2 years, and you haven't shown a value, chances are that you'll be shut down very quickly or very high. So it is also imperative that you have to deliver this piecemeal approach of showing something tangible, especially with data projects, because there's always a lot of expectation from stakeholders who are not a data management purist, as we call it, who don't understand
the whole
the bigger picture, blah blah blah. But they are very, very focused on my day-to-day basis. If I'm an operator who is booking and calling logistics operations, how does it impact me? Or how does it impact my business unit in general? So that's how you have to explain this.
Yeah, I mean, again, I can only agree with you. And I mean, you have been a consultant, and you now in the industry. I have been in the industry, and now again in consulting. So we both know both sides. Yeah, and what I used to say, and I'm still saying, is that there is no one-trick pony that you can just use and apply and then think, oh, it will work out. Yeah, especially as you said, during the time that we're living in, and the expectations on one hand that are so high, and also impatience attached to these expectations, and then on the other hand, so much development that is happening. We talked about the time where there was more or less nothing really existing that you can look to and rely on. Now there's so much, and you have to pick what is the right one or what is the suitable one for your company. So I always used to say, like, it is worth taking the time to really engage with the culture of the company and to find out what is driving them, what do they really need, how can I implement certain standards. I mean, yes, there are common standards, and we would agree on these standards that are needed, regardless of the company and so on, but it needs to be implemented on their terms, and on their terms is their understanding, their way of dealing with it, the level of complexity, and so on. And you just mentioned that, like the return of these kind of investments, and now, I mean, you have worked for plenty of global organizations, and a topic which is still something that keeps company quite busy is setting up the level of centralized or decentralized data governance, especially if you have regional entities and units. So my question is, how do you face these challenges of finding the right balance of centralized and decentralized? And maybe before you answer this question, what is, in your words, just to make sure that we're all on the same terms, what is for you, what are the key differences of federated data governance and centralized data governance models?
Yeah, certainly. It's also I would say sometime a Goldilocks problem, where you're trying to find a delicate balance between from expediency perspective, how much compliant you are and how much practical you are when it comes to that. So for me, governance is always expediency. How to put a balance between pragmatism and compliance. So when it comes to central versus federated, I would rather define this from the perspective of how much freedom do you have in execution or implementation of your data management responsibilities. Yeah, and that degree of freedom really defines me whether you are being told or do you have enough degree of freedom to execute and define things based on your own purview or scope. Yeah. So and my experience, generally central concept of data management works best when you are dealing with a very high level of maturity within a company, a small company, or low level of maturity. Yeah. So a low level of maturity, or maybe a small company where you say, okay, not everybody understands this concept. Maybe for me, it's important that I set up a team there centrally who oversees these topics of data management, of regulatory compliances around data perspective, and run this through what should be the organization strategy around it. And then, since it's a small company, I'm able to define this for the corresponding business units or regions for that matter. And that's manageable. It makes sense because it's not a big task to do this if you're a small organization or a startup. But when it comes to complicated organizations where you have multinational companies, likes of my current organization, or big pharmaceutical giants or big banking companies, it's very tricky to have that similar concept and replicate this in the setup, because you would immediately face a lot of backlash when it comes to setting up these policies, frameworks, and directives from the top, and you don't give any freedom for your business units, for regions, and things like that to accommodate to those, because it won't make sense, and the compliance will become a really big challenge when it comes to that. So you have to ensure that there's you lay down these policies, these frameworks, the overarching concepts, but then you facilitate or empower the federal team, which is either region or country based on how big you are, and allow them to define their own approach of how they want to implement these, or adapt the policies if needed to address the region-specific regulations or region-specific requirements. For example, you have something very Eurocentric, but when it comes to US, you obviously have a delineation when it comes to regulatory requirements from Federal Reserve or from FDA when it comes to pharmaceutical companies. So sometimes you may not have like-for-like matches there. So some accommodation adaptations are needed. And same goes for other industries, for like retail, or let's say for logistics in my case, that you would have to have a separate, a bit of a freedom given to adjust what needs to be defined or what can be implemented there, what is feasible, what is not feasible, and then make sure that there are self-governing bodies in form of federal teams or data teams who are then reporting some on these topics to the central team. So that's how I would structure this, the concept of centralized and federal, and then there is complete federated, where we are going to an extreme end where say, okay, I think there's no need of a central team altogether, and we are all very self-aware, self-fulfilling, we know everything. I guess that's also a depiction of very high level of maturity, where every team understands why we are doing this, and they all manage them separately in a very harmonized approach.
But a follow-up question to that: if we say completely federated, that would mean there's nothing centrally giving as a standard policy and so on. Have you seen companies that are completely federated? The data management is or governance is completely federated and it has worked?
I've seen companies that have started their their journey with the federated approach, but sooner realized that they need something central.
Yeah.
So and this is, I can understand the reason behind it is typically driven through like I said, every BU have some set of mandates to fulfill based on regulatory requirements, based on key objectives that they need to show. Sometimes the data management is taken a bit more seriously in let's say in R&D versus in other parts of our supply chain, or maybe. So they would say start with the initiative because they have a buy-in from the management and they have to show something. They have the budget, so they start bottom up and start working through the data management approaches. So they have implemented something, they have process, policies, stuff like that. And eventually you would see the other BUs have figured out, okay, I think we need to start working on this as well, because it appears there's definitely benefit to it. And they start their own initiative. So they involve another consulting company. They worked with different consulting company. They came with different proposal. They're two working on different concepts of how they should implement data quality and stuff like that. They have different, let's say more or less different policies set up. They have different tech stack set up. I've seen that.
Okay.
One is working on different tech stack for data management. The other one is different. So imagine that's the kind of mushrooming initiatives, and it's purely driven by self interest, and not really looking at the overarching holistic enterprise initiative. So it works, and it works for that specific BU. But when it comes to the whole organization as such, there's not very much benefit out of it, because there's no sync between these two worlds of two different data teams working separately in silo. They're working on different concepts. They are not reusing their different concepts already. They're working on different tech stack, investing money in different tech stack. They could have worked in one single tech stack for that matter. So the cost efficiency is lost there. And that is sooner or later is being figured out by somebody on the top. They say, okay, why are we investing so much money in these two worlds? From IT standpoint, it doesn't make sense, because then they would run a different harmonization exercise and say, okay, maybe from tomorrow onwards we work on an enterprise data catalog and get rid of all these siloed data catalogs or data platforms. Let's work on data mesh concept. Let's see migrate from one brand of data catalog to the other brand of enterprise data catalog, or we work only on mesh catalog, you know. So that's a concept, that's something that sooner or later somebody from IT or enterprise, somebody from CIO office or CTO office will realize. And of course, and when it's realized, then it also comes to the fact that, okay, maybe to orchestrate all of this, it makes sense to establish a central team.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I like what you said. So even if it's data management wise working, that you are completely federated, from a company point of view, you will reach a stage where you say we have to reduce complexity in the IT landscape, or we need to have standardization of certain functional activities and processes and so on. Therefore, we need to have a certain level of centralized governance in place that is keeping all these different regional or units on the same page. So we can, in other words, a level of centralization is sooner or less always required.
Always required. And I would say, when we are talking about two extreme ends, we have 100% centralization and we have 100% federation. I think these are, let's say, they're slowly evolving to become a hybrid concept eventually, where you have a component of centralization and a component of federation always coming. And I think this self-balancing occurs based on what stage your company maturity and growth is. So if you're a startup, you're somewhere other end of the spectrum, and you're working completely on a centralized concept.
Yeah.
Maybe you're a very mature organization, you're working on this federated concept, and slowly when you start figuring out things that there is inherent efficiencies and you're growing big, you tend to move towards center gradually, but over a period of time. But that's a journey that organizations takes place, and I've seen that. It takes time, but it happens. It gravitates toward a more centralized, a combination of centralized and federated always.
From your experience, and now, I mean, you mentioned that you have now a team of 30 dedicated data management role holders. First of all, could you maybe share with us what different roles do you have in your under your supervision? And the second question I would like to ask you is, what would you recommend to provide from a central data management to the entire enterprise or data management organization across the global enterprise structure?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've seen both side of the argument, where when it comes to provisioning of how should we address this problem. I've seen organizations spending millions and millions in building human machinery on the top to manage a central office, data office, whose day in day out job is to build reports on different other parameters that the organization is doing. So run this change management initiative, run a communication initiative in parallel for these data management projects. But I've also seen a leaner version of the central data office, where you're only focusing on just, let's say, one person, potentially under CDO, who's managing this from governance side, somebody who's managing data projects, and I think that's sufficient to make that work. It all depends upon how bigger your scope is, and how complicated that is it a mandate from regulatory standpoint to become that complicated? So in my experience, the things that would work for an organization from central data office perspective is to figure out what should be the scope of your governance, at what stage the organization is, what is the current scope and mandate that you have from your organizational roadmap, and transfer those things into your data roadmap. So data strategy, data governance roadmap. And then based on that, you can say, okay, based on this, maybe we have to first target your organizational reference and master data, because that's definitely a very, very important point, which is often ignored, that companies do sometimes only focus on master data, or maybe only on some other data, transactional data, but not really on reference and master data to begin with. So I would say let's focus on reference and master data to begin with. That should be your key starting point, and then slowly increase the scope of governance to transactional data and other types, unstructured data, which is very good if you have something, a policy in place to address these. But it takes a lot of effort in terms of orchestrating all of this, which is why I said reference and master data is complicated enough, which is why organization who tends to go beyond that eventually builds up a bit of a, let's say, a resource machinery on the top when it comes to central data office layer, because you would have to deal with not only writing down policies around your reference and master data, unstructured data, transactional data. You would have to, somebody has to ensure, or being a central data office team, you would have to ensure that there's a policy compliance. So how would you report on these? what kind of framework would you use for your policy compliance? How would you report on your data policy compliance? How would you monitor them? What should be the trigger of action? Somebody has to orchestrate this from centrally, yeah, and that requires a bit of an effort. So I would say you would need those kind of, let's say, typical people set up there. In a more leaner version, you don't need that kind of manpower. Maybe you just focus on one topic, have work with data stewards, data owners who are being appointed for reference and master data in different BUs, and you coordinate with them directly.
Okay.
And whatever data projects that you're doing or running centrally, you engage with them in this these various data interaction platforms, as we call it. Maybe your data councils that you set up, or data committee that you set up. So you can really stick to some agenda items which you're constantly reporting on. For example, your data quality issues, your TQ KPIs, and other policy compliance matrices and things like that, which is a kind of a concern when it comes to show how healthy your data is. Obviously called data health, and that in itself would be sufficient to drive these things from central layer.
So basically you have your extended network with these ownership and stewardship roles that are representing BUs or data domains, and they engage then further with their representatives of functions, processes, and even regional entities.
Regional entities or country, whatever based on how you're set up. But I would also involve in these discussions somebody from IT. So maybe a platform owner, a data platform owner should be the one. If there are different applications involved, or if just one application, then that's fine. But if there are more than one applications, then you need to involve corresponding data IT platform owners from their side.
It does make sense what you're saying, especially that you have these networks and collaboration setups in place where you continuously engage with them on certain data management topics such as data quality and data definition and so on. But coming back to the question of what needs then to be provided centrally, what exactly would you recommend? Okay, even if we go this path, and we have our roadmap is foreseen that we have a federated hybrid setup. Where would you say, okay, before or even if we go into that path, these are certain pillars where we need to ensure that they are standardized throughout the entire organization?
Like I said, your data strategy or data roadmap, that it's very, very important that it's tied to your enterprise roadmap or enterprise strategy, enterprise business strategy or enterprise strategy, whatever you would call it. Most organizations have this, and based on that, if you say, okay, my enterprise strategy says that I have to increase the customer experience or improve the customer experience. I have to improve employee experience. I have to improve, the customer touch points. And then eventually you think, okay, what can I do from data perspective to support these pillars? The ESG is another topic that is very relevant from these perspectives. So every organization now has ESG mandate, ESG targets to fulfill. So as an organization, if you have an ESG as part of your roadmap, clearly you need to also support ESG reporting or ESG mandate from data perspective. So all of your data strategy the component that I talked about has to reflect that how would you support these business strategy from data strategy perspective. I think data science analytics is definitely a core component which will support you in doing this. If you're a pharmaceutical company, you're trying to reduce your cost from R&D perspective. So data science and analytics will only be able to support you or treat data as an asset, as they call it, if you are able to address those fundamental pillars of FAIR, as you call it, the term FAIR: findable, interoperable, reusable, and things like that. So, or accessible. So you would have to address those FAIR concepts into your different pillars, making sure you have a unified glossary, making sure you have a data DQ metrics, making sure you have a data lineage in place, you have a standard data contract defined, you have a standard interface through which you're accessing data across the pool, maybe a data mesh architecture. So that kind of concept would then help you to achieve the end goal, which is to have a better data science, data analytics, if that's your core component of your data strategy. Which will then in turn support your business strategy. Okay, this is how I support ESG reporting, this is how I support customer touch points. So these data projects are then tied up. So these are your fundamental pillars. Based on these fundamental pillars, you define the overarching policy. What should be my scope of governance first? Let's target reference and master data. Then you start using AI policy, because now generative AI is being heavily used by data science analytics. So now you used to have an AI policy. Then you have a data protection policy, data security policy. All these policies would eventually come into existence, and then you have transactional data standards or things like that you can set up. You can also have a unstructured data policy. All these policies would come into existence. That will provide you an overarching guideline to organization from an organization perspective, and then you have business unit which will take these policies and say, okay, this is how we have to apply or implement these standards. So I have to follow this parameter. As long as that is fulfilled, then I'm in compliant with the policies. And that is there. And that kind of strategy and policy would basically convert into your different SOPs, working instructions, and things like that. That eventually gets implemented on the ground. Both from operational, from IT perspective. So I would see that the responsibility from CDO or Central Data Office is more of a facilitating, providing the thought leadership support, providing the enterprise guidelines, policies, working, let's say, best practices that would support organization in doing these things. And or maybe if you have to drive some enterprise initiatives that make sense, for example, implementing data mesh, which is an enterprise focus, doing a cloud migration of applications that makes sense, using an enterprise data catalog or data governance platform makes sense. So these kind of things can be run on enterprise level. And they say, okay, what are my golden jewels that I could find, or golden data assets that I can find, and then onboard them centrally, and then hand it over to the corresponding regional team or BU team. So I see the role of the Central Data Office is more of an advisor and consultant, rather than forcing or let's say pushing down on people and really implementing these things on ground level, because the groundwork always would work better if you hand it over to the corresponding BUs, because they know their business better, far better than you do on day-to-day operational level. So operational level, I doubt any organization, unless until you're a very small organization, would be driven through a central data team.
So you would say a central team, as you said in your own words, facilitates, provides a framework in a way, which is clear on policies, whatever the company is looking for at the moment. So this needs also to be in a way scalable and adaptable to the company's objectives, and but you would not engage too much with a central governance team in the operational processes, because business units, functional units, they know their processes and so on. May I ask, because I would like really to hear your opinion on, how about if you have data harmonization topics, and a classical example is business partner, so what is a customer, you have heard it probably as well many times. So you have finance, they have their view, you have sales, marketing, they have their view, so, and they all see business partner, or customer. How do you engage in these kind of topics and challenges that they are? Because I would assume that the business units just by themselves would probably, depending on their level of maturity, would not be able to solve these issues just by themselves.
I mean, so for me, I think in bigger organizations or complex organizations, much like myself, where I work in, and any other complex organization, you would have to work with levels of abstraction. What those levels of abstraction would be is something that you would have to define and say, okay, maybe from enterprise level, this is how I define a customer. It can be abstracted to a very generic level. And then you can have, from that enterprise definition, you can have subsequent definitions which are abstracted on BU level, or let's say not BU level, but rather line of business level. And you can say, okay, for finance, or for whatever, contract logistics, or for this is what I mean, or this is what it means to encompass. So that when it comes to your terms, business terms and glossary, you would have to define this on enterprise, and then you have to come up with the abstraction when it comes to the BU or the line of business. And then you can link that terms to the corresponding BU-specific metadata that exist in their local applications, because it's very difficult to harmonize everything. So you cannot do that every time. What you can do is, potentially, if you have a centralized MDM, you can define an MDM glossary and an enterprise term, and from that you always have to abstract this down to further local glossaries or terms that are being used in local applications, and then provide some kind of semantic relationships between those two worlds. Otherwise, you will end up boiling the ocean, because it's very difficult to run a complete harmonization exercise for a complex organization, and it is much easier to do this in a smaller setup. Versus if you're a big organization, and you're trying to come up with one definition of a customer, you would have severe challenges in convincing everybody. Let's say you most of the time will not be able to convince most of the people. So you have to be as general or abstracted as possible. And then you have to be specific when it comes to specificity of different BUs to meet their requirements. So this is how I would say the terminologies exist. In my setup, I have we have abstracted in a form of business partner terminology. A business partner that encompasses everything, customers, suppliers, and non-governmental entities and things like that. And then we basically then have a semantic relationship from that abstraction to the corresponding BU specific terms that exist. So
so you break it down.
We have to break it down.
You have to break it down into digestible and fitting concepts for each of the functional units.
So you would have to have let's say from from master data perspective, reference data perspective, you can have an enterprise terms.
Yeah.
But then you have, when it comes to local applications or BU specific applications, you have to break it down to the corresponding.
And this facilitating exactly these conversations and defining the different layers.
Yeah.
That would be the responsibility of the central data management team from your point of view?
From my perspective, driving these conversations when it comes to harmonization initiative, it's definitely a central data office topic, because you're really touching base and moving across organization, breaking the barrier, cross verticals. So you need to have a mandate to do this and some authority to do this, and this is only available with a CDO. You cannot drive these topics, especially with enterprise reference master data by one specific BU, because they don't have enough incentive to do this. Second, they don't have time to do this, so they can focus only on their current BU task. And they are incentivized for only spending the time and effort for their BU activities. And not necessarily interested in what's going on in the other line of business.
I agree with you, and I would add to the list a third aspect, which is credibility. I think it's easier to come to general terms with a central objective governance team that is facilitating it and is actually out of the ownership of the data and is making sure that it is overall at least addressed. Otherwise you would have maybe some conflicts of interests. If the different BUs are engaging in it, and I mean, this is my experience. I have seen many companies where the different BUs had it difficult to speak, first of all, the same language, so that they know actually what are they talking about to each other. And secondly, it was a little bit of, okay, you want to tell me how I need to work, or what is mine and not yours, or so on. So the third aspect would be really like to have a objective unit in place that is facilitating and is making sure that the emotions, the conflicts of interest are not interfering in the definition of data and data quality.
It's I have to be very conscious of these
human
kind
factors.
Of discussions, because human factor is definitely a component where you don't get different stakeholders get riled up on who should have the ownership, especially the concept of ownership is sometimes often taken too far or misunderstood when it comes to data. And people somehow feel, why should I own stuff, But when we are talking about data ownership, we're not really talking about owning the data per se, but rather content of the data that you're curating. I mean, data per se is an organizational asset, and it belongs to the organization. It belongs to the organization,
exactly.
But when you're talking about content ownership, you're responsible for creating a content. And that will, of course, be realized or be stored in a specific data platform. So we are assigning you, or the governance team is assigning you a responsibility for owning the content. And the content should be relevant for you, because it made a lot of difference if you call an apple a banana, because you're changing the content or the definition of the term. So I see no difference as to why this should be an issue. Of course, it should also be looked from the perspective of let's say accountability, beneficiary. So when it comes to ownership discussions, when you're looking speaking to different stakeholders, who is the ultimate, or who is the most beneficial stakeholder in these kind of decisions? Who's creating the data, and also among that creators of data are ultimate beneficiary, the most beneficiary of this data. And I think that should have the highest stake in making sure that the content is relevant, and should assume the potential data content ownership or data ownership for the data. And I think that is the approach that I found work for the most time, where you say you have always somebody says, oh, that team also creates data. Why my team has to take ownership for this? So you would have to use this sometimes as a tiebreaker to say, okay, but who's benefiting the most out of this, and who's creating the most, and who's also benefiting the most, of course. And then if you're benefiting the most, you have equal skin in the game to make sure that the content is relevant. And in thus, your team should be responsible for content ownership. Even though that there are some people who are also contributing to this, but that's fine. You know, and you still have the highest stake.
Would you say, I mean, based on what you said, I mean, you're familiar with the non-invasive data governance concept of Robert Seiner. So you would say that companies should make, or central data management units should make the effort to identify the right people who are owning the data based on how they are dealing with the data, whether they create it, whether they are the most the unit that is most benefiting out of the data. So you would recommend not to disrupt too much the workflow as they are.
Yeah, you're right. I would also recommend this a non-invasive approach, because that means that you're reusing a lot of existing processes and resources to drive these data management topics or initiatives, to comply with these regulations, instead of just building another workforce to do this. And that there are organizations I've seen, they have dedicated team of army of people who are just doing day in day out this kind of stuff. But
it's unnatural.
But it's not really. I mean, if your whole intention is to just create jobs for the sake of it, then it's a different topic. But I think for the most perspective, people who are handling data day in, day out are much more aware of the nuances and the quality of data that is expected, and the processes that would have an impact on the quality, as opposed to hiring somebody new, training them specifically for this particular job. That would still be, let's say, from time perspective, that resource is 100% committed on this. I understand there's a benefit to that, but I would say it in the long run, it's very, very it's not very helpful, because eventually he would have to intervene and interact with somebody on an operational level to say, okay, this is how it should be. Can you help? You are building complexities with that approach in your organization. So the more human component that you're building in, who are dedicatedly working on this, is also adding more people to agree with or to disagree with. So and then also to train is a different thing. But eventually, I would say that somebody who's also working day in, day out, has a higher stake, knows the data better, has a genuine incentive to make sure that quality should be good, would understand and should support, apart from its regular or his or her regular day job, on these kind of initiatives.
Abhishek, I have one last aspect that I would like to touch with you, which are the role holders. I mean, we talked about central central data management teams, then decentral ones, and then we talked about regional or maybe country specific. So if we talk now, if we tackle now these topics from the role perspective, would you say, for example, it makes sense to have a country specific data architect, data quality manager, or would you say there is also a kind of pattern where you would recommend, based on your experience, these are more centralized roles, these are more, let's say, global decentral roles, or these are specific country or regional roles that have proven themselves as a best practice or good practice.
Yeah, I would say it has a lot to do with your organizational tech stack.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, because
Yeah.
it also drives what kind of complexity your architecture is at.
Yeah.
A complex organization specifically which has grown inorganically
Yeah.
through multiple merger and acquisitions and
Yeah.
things like that has a lot of legacy burden to carry forward.
Yeah.
So that legacy comes in form of legacy tech stack.
Yeah.
And you need experts to deal with
Yeah.
those tech stacks sometimes,
Yeah.
and which makes sense to deliberate upon keeping a dedicated architect, a dedicated BI team for supporting these things, unless and until a harmonization initiatives taken place, to do a centralized, one enterprise data architect, one data science team who's working on enterprise level. But this is, let's say, this is not the reality in most of the big complex organizations. Maybe for a small organization it would work, but for big complex organizations, you need an enterprise data team. It should comprise of your enterprise data science, somebody from enterprise data science team, which will more of a horizontal layer as opposed to a vertical. And then you should have an enterprise data architecture team, which should be aligned with various other regional or country specific data architects or data engineers, whatever, because the tech stack is different. Sometimes it's completely legacy or completely new. Sometimes that you on organization level you're still working on legacy, or one BU is working on a very innovative new concept. So you would need this kind of architecture board or data science analytics board from that perspective. And then you can have a central team, of course, with, let's say, central stewardship team who's responsible for curation, maintenance of data for certain types of data, let's say customer master data or business partner master data, and for some other relevant master data or reference data. But then you have some regional master team or a stewardship team, content owner team who is responsible for owning and managing distributed reference and master data, which are federated mostly and more specific when it comes to BU or line of business. So there, I would say it has a lot to do with how you're shaped and how your tech stack is. And then you would have to devise a framework that works and supports that tech stack.
Thank you. One of the benefits, I think, when I was in the head of data management role in a global company was it gave you sometimes a reason to travel. I mean, it's not like that we like to travel too much, because also it's very exhausting in a way, but there were here and there some nice locations where you could travel to. In my case, for example, Malaysia or US or something, and I like to travel there. I know that you're also a big fan of traveling.
Indeed.
What is it that it makes traveling so attractive to you?
It's just I think I had this curiosity in general to know more about this new culture, new places, visiting historical monuments and artifacts and things like that. So that kind of was there already from as a child. It grew in. And then as I grew up, I was born in India, so I visited a lot of places in India, of course, through excursions and things like that. So through my professional life, I had an exposure to travel to other countries. Like I traveled to London for business assignments, and then was stationed there for a while. before traveling to Germany at the end.
Yeah.
And then within Europe, since I'm based out in Europe now, so traveling to Netherlands, Belgium,
Yeah.
Switzerland
Yeah.
was quite easy access, and also Denmark. So learning new culture, learning new places, I think it's a very, very satisfying experience that you
Yeah.
could get, especially when you're coming from a small town, and maybe you're itself, the culture is quite rich in India.
Yeah.
So you like to learn more about the
Yeah.
places and that you could see, and realize what and how things work in different other places. And that kind of inquisitiveness already existed in me, and one that I embraced that a lot. And then after I have a daughter now, a 6-year-old.
Yeah.
So she loves to also explore places, and I also
Yeah.
try to take her to these trips.
Nice.
And
Nice.
she loves to travel with my spouse.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's a very satisfying experience when it comes to exploring these places, exploring beautiful
Yeah.
areas and sceneries and scenic beauty and natural beauty
Yeah.
that exist in the world. I would say, which is why I love to do it often whenever I get time, of course. But being stationed in Europe also gives you access to a lot of other proximal areas which are very, very, very rich in natural
it's true.
beauty.
It's true. In that sense, Germany being in Central Europe, it is definitely an advantage. If you live in Germany, it's quite easy to get to a lot of countries which are around Germany. You mentioned Netherlands, Belgium, Austria, Switzerland. Here from the north, you can easily get to Denmark and
Finland, I would say.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
that's one of my bucket lists, to travel to Finland and see the Northern Lights. That's still in my bucket list, but yes.
And I have prepared a little bit of activity for us, which is related now to traveling. For that we will go over to the bigger screen.
Okay.
And let's see what we will how we will engage in that activity. If you like it.
Let's go start it.